Welcome to the Esoerotic Dark Feminine Magic podcast. My name is Crimson, creatrix of Esoeroticism, and I help mystically minded folks awaken their dark feminine magic. Welcome to the Portal of Enchantment. Hello and welcome to our May Rambling and Musings. So, this is just a podcast where I wax poetic without any notes or outline on a topic. And this month's topic is all around being single and childless. And so, I had a couple weeks ago put in a newsletter how finding acceptance, and not just acceptance, like utter joy in being single specifically, has been such a reclamation for me. And I said, hey, if anyone's wanted to hear more on this topic, hit respond. And a bunch of people did. A range of responses from, listen, I'm struggling with this right now. Can you speak more to it? To, hell yeah, girl, I'm with you. And it's been a journey. Can we put this out there? And so, yeah, I'm going to set this up, just preface so I can get this out of the way so I don't have to keep like qualifying and lose my flow during the podcast. Just because I'm pro something does not mean that I am anti the opposite. So I am not anti being in relationship, being married, kids, having kids. Blanket statement. And, my heart goes out to people who maybe do very much want to be in relationship or do really want to have kids, and that hasn't been a possibility. So qualifying with that. Also, I'm going to be speaking from the feminine perspective. I identify as a woman, and so this is obviously meant for a full spectrum. But if I use certain words, I'm not meaning to leave anyone out of the conversation, but from my female feminine perspective. So yeah, with all of that being said, I want to start with the childless thing up front, because I'm going to be honest, that was not something that was very challenging for me to move through and accept. So, I think there's a lot of conversation around like women's value being held in, being able to have children and raise children and being a mother. And, it to a concerning extent, as we're seeing in maybe some of these like extreme right wing, fundamental religious, handmaid tale visions. And I never felt that pressure. So even when I was a kid, my mom says, yeah, we stopped buying you dolls because you never wanted to play with dolls. All you ever wanted to do was clean your room and change outfits. And like, I remember being like 4, and yes, that being something that very much was something that brought me joy. I never fantasized around having kids or naming my kids. And it was just never something that I felt pressure around. Even as a teenager, oh my goodness, by the time I was like 10, I was into all the teen and even like beauty and fashion magazines, as maybe detrimental as that was. But I always just dreamed of being like an adult woman out in the world. And that never came with like a baby carriage. So I don't want to say that that was like a big challenge that I moved through. Being single is what I'm going to spend more time on, because I do feel like that was more of a challenge for me. But that's kind of like someone being like, I've reclaimed this part of myself that never really was an issue. Like when people, I know some people will talk like very openly and proudly of their sobriety and how they, have quit alcohol. And then I've heard them in the past say how they don't even really like alcohol and never really drank much. Like it's not like a big thing to proclaim. You didn't really move through much. You just did the thing that is very much comfortable to do. So, with that being said, being childless, yeah, there's some crazy extreme conservative thoughts out there that should be my main purpose. But as a proud childless cat lady without the cat as well, those are not my people and I don't feel pressure around that now. So let's get to, this being single, because that is definitely a challenge that I have moved through my life. And I'm going to bring this into a belief where I have landed on, which I actually think that this was the path that I was meant to take and be on, and that it's actually a really huge sovereign reclamation for my lineage and for, my ancestry, for the feminine in general. But we'll get there. I want to talk you through my story first, because I think were raised in a way that in some way, especially I'm going to say as women, as femmes, that we were taught that our values was based in being chosen. And that's not something that just came out of nowhere. It's based in survival. In our last April Rambling and Musing, I talked about being a witch and how women were not able to own land or property. And therefore, if they didn't have a husband, if their husband passed, if they, their father passed, they were relegated to the woods. They had to survive on their own. And therefore, there's inherent safety that comes from being chosen by a man. We have to acknowledge that it was just over 100 years ago that women got the right to vote in the US. And so there conceivably people who, if they're like 106-year-old, were born when women couldn't vote, right? So that's new. We've talked before about how women weren't able to have bank accounts independent of a husband or a father until the 70s. That's wild. Like, and so, yeah, I'm not dispelling anything that you didn't know already, that, women being able to earn their own money was a challenge until very recently. And so if we wanted to survive, if we didn't want to be relegated to be like the hag in the woods, which I don't know, kind of sounds like a better option sometimes, but I digress. We had to be chosen. And we see that culturally, and even in my mother's generation, that it was to be beautiful. That was like why it was like this obsession, especially I feel like in the 50s. It was like, oh my gosh, to be beautiful, and then to have like a nice 18-year-old boy choose you to be, his wife, and then he's going to go and get his law degree, and you're going to have the children, and you're going to be safe, and like that's your life. And so, and if this is why I think we have a lot of hangups around our beauty and our aesthetics and our looks, because it's embedded in us that that's our social currency and that's our survival. That's how you become, now it's evolved beyond that. And we have the word being a pick-me. But when I think about the pick-me's out there, I'm sure you guys, if I know what it is, you all know what it is. But this like desperation of being like chosen by men, being a pick-me is kind of like, almost like throwing other women under the bus and throwing concepts of feminism and all of the work we've done to find equality and voices and rights under the bus as like this weird subconscious safety mechanism of like, well, if I side with the boys, if I side with the red pill bros, they'll choose me and then I'll be safe. I think it's all rooted in safety and survival. And so we're deconstructing that, and that's not going to just happen in a generation. Just like, we're not in a post-racial society. We don't all of a sudden not have racism after passing a law. And so it takes time, it takes deconstruction, and that's what we're moving through right now. But it's so prevalent of how being raised, I remember being young and being fed these through media and through even what was celebrated amongst my family and friends of being in a relationship. You see we see the Disney that we were raised on, which, by the way, that was another telltale sign that I didn't want kids. I'm not a Disney girly. In fact, fun side story, I was hired by Disney when I was an art director to redo their whole branding around their D23, which is like their heavy hitting like fans. And I remember like having to like text friends and being like, what's this was like before, I guess, heavy handed interneting, and like, oh, I need a character who's like this, or like I had all these artwork assets and I was like, who is this? What do I need to know about? about them. And those friends now have babies. But anyway, maybe that's why, maybe that's why I've rejected Disney, because what it did to me as a child. um, but the princess being, finally Prince Charming comes and saves her. And I even think about how, like, I have a niece and adore her. Um, love myself once they become teenagers. That's good. But she recently got a boyfriend, and it's like, oh, we just like love seeing pictures of them together, and like, oh, she got a boyfriend, and oh my god, they're gonna go to the prom. And it's like, oh my gosh, we like totally feed into it, and like it's the best thing that she's succeeded at. Meanwhile, like, this girl's doing, like, killing it in school, doing so well on all of her testing, gonna be going to college. And it's like, but we're fawning over like the photos of her and her boyfriend. Like, dude, it's still happening. It's still happening. And so yeah, I had that imprint, and I always equated it with, the worth of, like, well, if I'm beautiful, then I'll be chosen by a man. And as an aside, I've been reading a lot of astrological charts lately. There's a lot of people who have a big energetic propensity towards being in relationship, being, having heavy seventh house placements. And I do not. I actually, and my Venus is in Gemini. And so here's a little astro tip for you. Where your Venus is placed is where you magnetize, especially the feminine masculizes the masculine through where their Venus placement is. Mine's in Gemini in the ninth house. It's all around intellect and conversation and wittiness, exploration of cultures and just higher learning in general is real loaded. So I've always had this disconnect of like, well, why am I not being chosen? It doesn't matter how much I beautify myself. That's not what's going to magnetize people to me. It took me a really long time to realize that. But anyway, so, and I remember even like getting my first boyfriend at 10 and being like, oh my gosh, this was like something that was so cool, like celebrating, we're going to dance and just really feeling like I had accomplished something. Now, let's move along the story. In my 20s, I talk a lot about, when I speak about my backstory with esoeroticism, how in my 20s I lived in New York City. I was really seeking some kind of like sexual liberation, and Sex in the City was huge at the time. And so, my angle, my strategy was to go out to bars and meet guys and go home with them. And, that was kind of my thought of how that worked. I wasn't very good at it. Did not bag myself a husband. And, had this disconnect again. While I'm doing the thing that is like they're supposed to love, so why don't they want to settle down with me? Definitely, met some really, and dated and was with some really wonderful men at the same time. And I think about, the ones who were the good ones, and now they're settled with kids in Jersey. I was never going to be that woman, but I didn't know that at the time. And so there was a lot of cognitive dissonance of like, why am I not being chosen? Why am I not being chosen? In my 30s, I moved to Los Angeles, and I definitely moved there for not relationship, but because just a change in personal life. But it was awesome. By the way, I love Los Angeles. I know some people have such a hatred towards Los Angeles. I wasn't in the industry. I wasn't trying to get famous. I had a grand old time. There's palm trees everywhere. The weather's beautiful. There's so many cool subcultures to explore. I loved it. But that is where I was in my 30s now. And it's like, okay, my friends are getting married. And I've been to a shit ton of weddings by this point. And excuse me, I also want to bring to the conversation the fact that at this point I had been doing pretty well in my career. I mean, I worked for it. I wasn't like Daddy Warbucks or anything, but I had at this point achieved to live independently in New York City by myself, to move myself across the country by myself where I didn't know anyone, start a new, job and life and personal experience there. And none of that was celebrate it. I was going and flying around and putting all my resources towards weddings, weddings, weddings. And that was what in my mind was like, after all that I've done, I'm not successful. I'm not successful because despite these things that I have done for myself, I still have not been chosen. And oh my gosh, I just want to go back and give her a hug, that version of me. But I did date a lot. This was where it was truly established that I have a terrible taste in men. That was definitely my like, I just love me a rock and roller type of boy. And that comes with things. And again, like I had a lot of heartbreak, some high highs, some low lows, but I've never actually moved in or ever even had to, bringing it back to the children, I never had to have a conversation with a man about like, should we have children? Because I've never lived with anyone. And so, yeah, so that was definitely a hard time in my life where I felt like I was facing rejection over and over again, and I wasn't meeting my person. And so I moved on. I didn't leave Los Angeles and move to Austin for a man or a purpose like that. I actually did move because I did not see myself really being able to root into what I wanted to do there because it was so expensive there. Isn't it so funny? I moved to Austin, those who do not know, Austin became expensive as hell at the same time. So moved to Austin at a time where it was a bit cheaper than it is now. And my idea was, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to buy a home. I'm going to meet my man. I'm going to like do the things that's finally going to make me fully successful. The man had to be in that vision still for me. And I would say Austin was the time where I dated probably the biggest losers. LA, the guys were nice. They just were like, they weren't for me. I would say in this arc was when I was really willing to settle for way less than I deserved. And I was willing to give so much more than partners were deserving of, because I was really getting to that point of like, okay, like this is my choices. This is where I am. And even if that was subconscious. And so, yeah, it's still never, I would say pretty much all losers. I did, there was one guy who was really a good guy and we really did try, but, and it was probably because he wasn't from Austin. He would travel in from Houston. So that's probably saying something, but yeah, it just wasn't there. And so didn't have much success in, again, being chosen there. And so I'm in my 40s now, right? At this point. And so the conversation goes from, oh, you'll meet someone to someday, right? In your 20s, to the conversations around it being, oh, well, like, what's wrong with her? And that's really, I was internalizing all of this. And if you've been single, you've probably internalized this too. Why aren't they choosing me? Okay, the problem's obviously with me, not because they're all losers. The being chosen's always on the woman or, the feminine. It's like, it was never, I'm not choosing correctly. It was always, I'm not being chosen. The problem is with me. And that's so pervasive in society. And, there was a lot of disappointment still. Excuse me, I am regaining my voice. So here we are now. Okay, so I'm in my 40s, and then the conversation goes. So it's no longer, oh, what'll happen to you one day, into, okay, what's wrong with you? The conversation has shifted, and this is where it gets really interesting. The conversation now shifts to, oh, well, it must be easy for you. And I really had to sit and unpack that, because how did it go from, I feel bad for you, there's something wrong to you, fuck you. And then I was like, am I sensing some jealousy? And this is where, so I'm in North Carolina now, and this is kind of where the story gets juicy. So thanks for hanging in there. I did warn you, it was a rambling. And this is really, so I've only been here not even, well, almost a year and a half at this point. And so, so much of this work happened in Austin. It happened around esoeroticism, and it happened in community there. And when I moved here, I really had the space to integrate it and really recognize, holy shit, you have completely transformed and you need this subconscious pick me, choose me um, tendency to really come into check. And it has. And it's magical. And so, what I started to realize is that I acknowledge that having children is challenging. It is hard. I'm not gonna. This is why I didn't want children. I'm not signing up for that. Um, and then there's still this kind of like, oh well, you didn't. You're single. You don't have a man. So like, there's something wrong with you. Like, but also like, oh, well, it must be easy to not have to deal with that. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not going to lie. If I could have a dual income household, do you know how much easier my life would be? Um, that's part of what I want to get into is what I have realized. Holy shit. I am embodying this work and I have almost been forced into a life where I have been forced to embody the work. Moving through this wound that is present in our bodies, in our DNA, in our lineage, in our ancestry, culturally, societally, around women not having the choice to be sovereign. I realized through this work with esoeroticism and all that it has afforded me, have been able to claim full sovereignty probably for the first time in my lineage, in generations. And past generations didn't have this opportunity. And so let me explain. Esoeroticism is essentially, I mean, it's the only movement modality, by the way, that alchemizes erotic expression and magical ritual. And its ultimate purpose is to help us reclaim our sexual sovereignty and bodily autonomy. And I have truly been able to do that through being single. Now, I get it. You can be single and have sex. You know, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about me being what I believe is a very sexual and erotic person. And I have achieved that completely outside of relationship. Okay? Like I did not need to be with a man or a partner. We'll say I'm straight, but I didn't need to be with a partner to truly say, holy fuck, I'm very sexual. And I don't feel that I am in a deficit of my sexuality or my eroticism because I'm single. Not at all. I feel like I've cultivated a lot of this life force independent of that. And it has carried me so far in my life. And so that's number one. Shit. Dude, women in the past had no sovereignty over their bodies or their sexuality. They weren't able to choose if they could have children. I was able to choose my body and say that I don't want children. And I had that choice. And that, there was a lot of people who fought for that choice. And there was a lot of science that went into, me being able to have contraceptive that allowed that. But wow, like that's mind blowing. Like I also was able to completely survive sovereignly without a man, not just in my body. So I would say in my body with children, in my sexuality, not being in relationship. And then thinking about, wow, and independently, sovereignly, I was able to heal a witch wound of sort because I was able to purchase. So those who don't know, a year and a half ago, end of 2024, purchased 7.5 acres in coastal North Carolina by myself, where I live. And we have the Esoteric Temple here, and it's a retreat property. And it's funny because I heard after I moved in that there were developers looking at it at one point and wanting to put, because there's enough land to put a lot of homes on. And I even hate saying like I'm a landowner, because it's like, I'm a steward of this land. Does anyone own land? But like, I want to be a steward of this land because I don't want anyone to build like a development here. And so that feels so like, whoa, that's a reclamation of all the women in the past who had to choose a man who had to be in relationship because they couldn't own property otherwise. And I talked in the last rambling about how, what did I talk about in that? I know I did an Instagram post on it recently, but how like very recently, just within the past few hundred years, me being here and owning this independently would have had me called a witch, accused of being a witch, and therefore burned at the stake so that neighbors' men could claim my property, because that's how that worked. Most people who were burned at the stake were just people who owned property and other people wanted it, you know? So even when we got the right to own property, we were accused of things that would have us killed so that other people could acquire it. That was just how society went. And I think, holy shit. So, in all of this, through this work, what esoeroticism has also afforded me is being able to like reclaim for my lineage and for the witch lineage, because obviously I call myself a witch openly now. That also feels very healing. So much of this feels so like, oh my gosh, this was my life purpose. To be able to reclaim all of that wounding that happened in generations past. And so if you struggle with, you know, feeling like my value isn't being chosen, you know, we all crave relationship, obviously. Am I going to have a relationship in the future? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't really care right now. I'm so happy being single. Do you know how fucking amazing it is to like wake up and not have to to care for someone? That sounds so awful, but like, I'm in my me era, I'm in my sovereign queen era. Okay, it's not what excites me. Having someone to I have so many amazing friends, some amazing friends and amazing family. I'm focused on my family right now, and you know, I don't feel like a man would really add anything to that right now. I mean, I definitely am not letting anyone live with me. That's not anytime in the foreseeable future. Maybe if I'm like older and that, you know, need help or assistance, but ain't no one living with me in this house. And I sound like an awful person, but it's because I've experienced finally the liberation of being happy and being not just accepting, but enjoy and choosing myself. And that's what being single and childless has afforded me. It has given me the opportunity to pursue what I want, to know who I am outside of external influence. You know, the things I do for my body is because I want to care for my body, not because I want to look good for someone else, you know? And so it's just, I feel like I've learned myself at such a deep level. And I definitely have healed also some, what's the word when you're codependent? What's the word when you're codependent? It's codependent. I've definitely healed some codependency issues. You know, I don't like saying because my Venus is in Gemini this or whatever, but I mean, I secretly do love saying it. But there are just some things like I have huge abandonment wounds that is very typified in anyone who is adopted, which I am. And you have this just like abandonment. And so you cling. And that has been, I mean, that's probably why a lot of past relationships didn't work out, because I was kind of clinging, not kind of clinging. I was clinging. And now I'm like, you can't be in my house, but oh, how far we've come. But yeah, I feel like I've healed that codependency abandonment wound. And it's always a process. We're always going to be doing deeper work. But yeah, being in this position has allowed me to really know myself, to know who I am outside of the external validation, outside of having to, you know, to tend or care for others. I mean, I'm still surviving capitalism and patriarchy and all that, but like, I know that sounds so selfish, and I was beating myself up for that. Like, you can't do a podcast being like, I can live my life for me and how I choose, which is not like greedy. I actually, a lot I'm realizing is community and collaboration is actually really deeply a deep desire for me. And especially like in the feminine, and I love that. But I have found that outside of like a romance, right? But we've never in the past, women's never been able to be greedy. We've never been able to be like, I'm just going to focus on me. I'm going to do the job I want to do. I'm going to choose if I want kids or not. I'm going to decide where I want to live. We never had that choice in the past. So yeah, maybe I am being selfish, but like in a really transformational way for healing like generations who never had that. This is part of the dark feminine. Like, wow, this is such a reclamation for what we've never been allowed to be in the past. And so, yeah, maybe I'm being selfish. Does it make my life easy? No, it does not make my life easy. It makes it's just different. My heart is different than your heart if you have, children and a spouse. Just as my easy is different than your easy, if you have children and a spouse. And we all have our own life path. And so this is like a shout out to those who maybe are in my shoes in one way or another, and maybe can you look at it as like this is a life path that maybe is doing is so powerful, that is healing the collective and is raising the feminine. We all have our role in the new paradigm, but I this the past my time here has really, wow, it's been a deep integration. It's been very kind of private. It's been very 12th house hidden, maybe, that I haven't shared as much, but it feels like I have gone through a threshold, and I'm coming out the other side realizing this is who I was meant to be. And wow, being able, the trifecta, being completely sovereign in my body, in my sexuality, in my, now realizing the in my magic, my, gosh, I don't want to say resources, but I guess like my creative choice, how I want to create my life. That's how I'm going to put it. Sovereignty in my body, my sexuality, and my creative choice of how I'm choosing to make money. Because here's the thing, I'm realizing that I am moving through a threshold in who I am as a person. And that also means what my work is. And I've completed a very big journey in my life that required me to find that sovereignty and to feel good in that sovereignty, and not to think that I was forced into sovereignty. I now see how I chose sovereignty and how good it's been for me. I love it. And the work has gotten me there. And I now do feel like I've heard this phrase is called a threshold guide. And I think I'm really going to be latching onto it. I think a lot of people listening to this are probably threshold guides. We are people who have kind of walked through the darkness, have had to do things through difficulty outside of patriarchal acceptance, because patriarchy says, you should be married with kids and probably grandkids at this point for me. And I didn't. And so, and maybe you didn't either, or maybe you did, and maybe you contribute in that way. But I think there's a bunch of us who had to learn things the hard way, the unconventional way, the taboo way. And that is because we are now at a time when patriarchy is falling and we are entering a new paradigm. And those who have learned to exist outside of typified patriarchal expectations are now meant to guide others through the threshold. Tell me how you feel about that. That's just been like arising and bubbling up. And so that's where my work is moving into, by the way. I've definitely completed a chapter, so look for some shifts coming, and I'll share, as the journey continues. But one thing that I really am excited to be doing is a free workshop where I'm going to be talking about that. Like anyone can join. I think I'm calling it Threshold, the Threshold. Um, a dark feminine, let's say, initiation. I think it's going to be called the Threshold, a dark feminine initiation, something like that, because I believe that we're about to walk through the threshold and be initiated into a new paradigm. Yeah, we'll say initiation into a new paradigm. I love talking about things before I have them named, but I already know it's happening in the beginning of June. And so it's going to be on the website, esoerotic.com. I'll put the link in the show notes because I'll have it up and named by the time I share this. But like, this is where all of this has led me. And I feel like there's a death happening within myself, probably within you. It's happening within society. And that the work that we have done or things that have not worked out for us, let's say, we're not a failure. Can you shift that perspective of seeing as a opportunity for sovereignty, an opportunity for you to realign with your purpose and why we're here? And it doesn't mean it's easy, but that's where I have found myself. That's what I'm really excited about, guiding other people through and collaborating with other people to support each other through. I've found the tools, I've done the work. You probably have too in some sense. But if any of this is, or if like you're like, I want to get to that point where you were able to find that, because it wasn't just me being rejected over and over and over again that got me to this point. That was not it. It was all of the embodiment and the esoeroticism and the dark feminine studies and the magic and the ritual that got me to where I am right now, to this point of like a death and a rebirth in the best way, into being a threshold guide, walking people through initiation. Like, that's my turn on right now. That's what I'm super hot for. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for the journey. And I do wish I could go back to like younger Crimson and be like, girl, you are doing amazing. Do not waste your time on these fuckboys. Do not waste your time on these scrubs. Remember Scrubs? Bring it back. So yeah, it's the rambles getting rambly. So I hope that I shared something that you found supportive or insightful, that it awakened something in you, because I know that there's a lot of people in our community who have similar experiences. And like, if you didn't and you just found this interesting, awesome. I celebrate everyone who lives their path in joy, whether that is you are married with 8 kids, or whether it is you're single with 2 kids, or you're single with no kids, whatever. Like, that's why, as an aside, astrology is definitely starting to enter my work. I've been doing a lot of astrology readings, specifically in the business coven that I run with my friend Emily. And it's like, the more charts you see, the more you see we are all so fucking unique. We all have such unique purpose and ways that we're supposed to engage with the world. So I'm never going to say everyone needs to be doing it my way. But I will say that having actually moved through it in a way that ended in a way that feels so completely satiated, and I hate the word empowered, so trite, but has given me some tools that I'm happy to share. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to this ramble and musing. I would love some engagement. Hit me up. Let me know your thoughts. What is anything resonating? Where are you? I love you. Stay in your magic. Mwah. I'll see you again soon. Bye. Okay, editing Crimson here, and I really did not land the plane on that ramble. That was a lot. So I just wanted to close things with a final statement, put a little bow on things. I have gotten to the point where I am not sovereign by force, because that's not true sovereignty, right? But I am truly sovereign by choice. And being able to make sovereign choices as a woman is truly revolutionary. Spending most of my time by myself in North Carolina has allowed me to decenter my life around men. And I've come to realize that in doing this and in being single, I have been afforded such a rich life, and I'm so grateful for that. So, what can be helpful to reflect on is this. Is there an area in your life where you don't feel valued or validated or successful within conventional patriarchal norms? And then consider that maybe this is a gift, because claiming sovereignty outside of problematic systems of oppression is a good thing, and it's how we're going to topple patriarchy. And I truly believe that so many of our souls chose these unconventional paths in order for us to be the ones that usher in a new paradigm, which we are living through right now. So with that, now we're done. Thank you so much for listening. Bye. Thank you for joining. Follow me on Instagram at crimson.minx and visit esoerotic.com to learn to live more fully and unapologetically in your magnetic power, sensual pleasure, and unlimited creative potential.